Thou wast transfigured on the mount, O Christ our God, revealing thy glory to thy disciples as far as they could bear it. Let thine everlasting light shine upon us sinners, through the prayers of the Theotokos, O giver of light, glory to thee.
Good evening. Christ is risen, Christos anesti. My name is Father Athanasios Heros, and I'm your host for this evening's live Bible study, a Bible study that we call the Church of the Holy Apostles, a Bible study on the book of Acts. This is session 55 out of 56, which means next week is our final session. And for those of you who have been with us from the very beginning, it's getting to be an emotional time as we prepare to close our books one final time next week. Not this week, though, so I hope you are attentive. Our Bible study, if you are new to our Bible study, is inspired by the homilies of St John Chrysostom, specifically the homilies that he preached in the year 400 in the season from Pascha to Pentecost. And along those lines, on my blog, which is www.liveanewlifeinchrist.org, and our Facebook page, I have been posting the session that matches up to the daily reading. So today there was not a reading from Pentecost, so there was nothing posted today, but tomorrow it will post again. So we've been lining up all of the Bible studies and to line up with the daily readings from Acts in this particular season this year. So it's been a fun kind of project. So if you have your hard copy edition, we are going to be reading finally in page 321 in homily 54. But if you don't have the homily book, it's okay, because all of the readings from there are also included in the study guide. If you have not yet downloaded your study guide, you can download your study guide at my website. Again, that's www.liveanewlifeinchrist.org, or also at our partner ministry at the Orthodox Christian Network. You can find that at myocn.net. Just click on the watch button and you'll see live Bible study. Click on there, scroll all the way down to tonight's date, and you'll see a link to the study guide for this evening's Bible study. We also have a live chat room available. Now, the only way to participate in the live chat room, well, there's really two ways to participate in the live chat. You can be here in Florence in the room with us, and there are several people here in the room with us, or you can participate using the live chat function on YouTube. In order to do that, you have to be watching on the YouTube watch page. And so right around here somewhere, there's a little YouTube logo on your screen. Click on there and it will open up in YouTube, and then you'll see the live chat stream and you can participate. Anyone who participates tonight will receive a handmade wooden cross necklace if I use your question or comment on live on the internet. That was a trick. That was a trick. I wanted to get everyone to pay attention. So if I use your question or comment live, then you are eligible to receive this free, wonderful wooden handmade cross necklace. So that's a wonderful thing that we offer to our fans. Speaking of fans, one of our biggest fans is online already. Matthew, I have a bone to pick with you. Now, for those of you who have been watching, you know Matthew is a student right down the road at Coastal Carolina University, which is in Conway, South Carolina, only about a 45-minute, depending on traffic, half-hour, 45-minute drive from Florence. And Matthew has been a bad boy. The semester is finished, and he went home to Raleigh before coming to Florence. He did not come to Florence before he left for Raleigh. So Matthew, I'm very ashamed of you. You are a bad boy. for going all the way to Raleigh without coming to Florence. But I will forgive you because it's the Pascha season, and also because it's the right thing to do. So I forgive you, Matthew, and if your mother is watching, I want your mother to give you a little dada for going all the way to Raleigh and not coming first to Florence to say hello in person. I don't know if you remember, when I went to Myrtle Beach in January, Matthew came running at me to meet me in person while we were there in January. So it was nice. It was nice to come. Matthew says, I'll try to come this summer to church. Well, Matthew, the idea is to come for Bible study and to get on live with us. You would have received the greatest gift of all, which is notoriety and fame. Your name, your voice would have gone through all of the world. All right, they're telling me to wrap it up now. Okay, so tonight's Bible study is the book of Acts, chapter 28, verses 1 through 16. And homily 54. So without further ado, let's go ahead and say our opening prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Shine within our hearts, loving Master, the pure light of your divine knowledge, and open the eyes of our minds that we may comprehend the message of your gospel. Instill in us also reverence for your blessed commandments, so that having conquered sinful desires, we may pursue a spiritual life, thinking and doing all those things which are pleasing to you. For you, Christ our God, are the light of our souls and bodies, and to you we give glory, together with your Father who is without beginning, and your all-holy, good, and life-creating Spirit, always, now, and forever, and to the ages of ages. Amen. Amen. Okay, so as a reminder, if you're new to a Bible study, please register. I know we only have one session left, but it does help us minister to you here at our ministry. So you can register free at my website, liveanewlifeinchrist.org, or also at the Orthodox Christian Network at myocn.net. All right, here we go. Who wants to start us off? The first section is verses 1 through 10, chapter 28, verses 1 through 10. Who wants to read first? Doesn't matter? Okay, so turn your microphone on, give it a second to warm up. Chapter 28, verses 1 through 10.
Warmed up?
It's good. Chapter 28, verse 1 through 10.
Now when they had escaped, they then found out that the island was called Malta, and the natives showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and made us all welcome because of the rain that was falling, and because of the cold. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out from because of the heat, and fastened on his hand. So when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, No doubt this man is a murderer, whom, though he has escaped the sea, yet justice does not allow to live. But he shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. However, they were expecting that he would swell up or suddenly fall down dead. But after they had looked for a long time and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. In that region there was an estate of the leading citizen of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and entertained us courteously for 3 days. And it happened that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and dysentery. Paul went in to him and prayed, and he laid his hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were healed. They also honored us in many ways, and when we departed, they provided such things as were necessary.
Okay, thank you. All right, so they're on their journey. Now, they're on this island the entire winter, okay? But they spend the time rather than going to the city. So there's this sense that they're not wanting too much attention at this point. But there's just so you know the timing. The entire winter they're on this island, which of course gave St. Paul additional time to be able to teach and preach and things like that. So a couple of things. First of all, so you understand the word natives. In Greek, the word here being used is barbarians. Now, barbarians in the Greek-speaking world of the ancient days was not a judgment as it was a political term. In other words, anyone from outside of the empire. So this was a political term. So the Roman Empire was considered the Hellenized world, and anyone outside of that were barbarians. Okay, so it was a political term. It wasn't, oh, you barbarians. These are the barbarian lands. Anything outside the boundaries of the empire. So that's who they're talking. Good or bad, correct. Just so, one way to look at it is, there are two types of people in the world: Greeks and barbarians. Okay, that's a fun thing to say because it's true. Just like there's Jews and Gentiles. Gentiles simply means non-Jew. Barbarians simply means non-Greeks. But we also know they're barbarians. So anyway, all right, so let's just continue there. So let's see. So Paul sets up this fire, and Chrysostom makes it a point to remind us that St. Paul doesn't always perform miracles. So although there's a miracle of the fact that he doesn't die from the viper, what St. John Chrysostom is saying to us is the fact that he's willing to light the fire for warmth, the fact that he's willing to cook his own food, he doesn't depend upon God's power for the regular things of life. Okay? He saves up, we'll say, he saves God's power for the important things, for the emergencies, for the power of the gospel. Not something so small as, I have to eat something, so let me start a fire. All right. Interesting. I personally thought it was interesting that Chrysostom made that point. Because going through Acts, I never got the sense that Paul was always performing miracles. So I'm thinking to myself, why would Chrysostom, now this is just me now, why would Chrysostom have made such a point that St. Paul cooked for himself? Well, he's trying to help us see St. Paul's humility and St. Paul's sense of, look, I am not the special guy here. I am not the one to be waited over hand and foot. If I got to eat something, I'll cook it. And we remember, St. Paul was a tent maker. And his entire life, he provided for himself. And that has always been a great teaching from St. Paul, that he was never a burden to anybody. And so I'm guessing that's why Chrysostom made such a big deal of that. Look, he's even cooking for himself. He saves the miracles for the emergencies. He saves the miracles for the important things for the gospel. He doesn't waste them on his own need. Then I leap from that and I think, well, maybe we could do better to use that mentality. And I don't mean cook for ourselves, although I like to cook. What I mean is to stop always wanting the miracle. How many times do we go through life with, oh, I just wish God would make this so much easier for me. Why can't God just do this for me? Why can't God just? So I'm kind of taking it from there and saying, just as a little parenthesis, this would be a beautiful inspiration from St. Paul, that, we got to fend for ourselves. We've got to feed ourselves. We've got to clothe ourselves. We have to house ourselves. We don't have to just simply, lay back and say, okay, God, take care of me. So maybe that's the connection here that Chrysostom was trying to make. However, the miracle takes place anyway, because as he's messing with the fire, the viper comes out and he bites him. And the point here that Chrysostom is making on this particular thing is that, again, there's this providential moment that God allows for all of this to be a very public experience. The crowd sees him bit by the snake. They know it's a viper. They know it is deadly poisonous. And then even the scriptures mention that they start talking amongst each other. oh my gosh, obviously this guy was a crook, because even though he was rescued from the shipwreck, he surely is going to die. And so here's what Chrysostom says about the fact that the people are talking amongst themselves, and they're assuming that St. Paul is guilty from the moment they see that he's bitten by the snake. Here's what Chrysostom says. Well, also was this permitted, that they should both see the thing and utter the thought, in order then, when the result ensued, there might be no disbelieving the miracle. So, the fact that they go through this whole process, they see him bit by the snake, they know it's deadly poisonous, and then they're waiting for him to die. They're assuming he's guilty, and then they see him not die, and then they realize, okay, something special is about this guy. And they do the same thing to St. Paul that they did way back in Acts 14. They assume he's a god. And then Chrysostom points out, interesting how the natives, the barbarians, went through life presuming that the gods were everywhere. There wasn't, even though it was a pagan world, there was not this sense of a faraway, distant God. Anywhere and any time, they believed they could encounter the gods. So it wasn't that, there was no shock. Oh, look, a God is here. Right? And Chrysostom points, look at that beautiful piety. Here the Jews are persecuting him. The people of God, the people who have the real God, are persecuting St. Paul. And the barbarians are going through, hey, look, it's a God, treating him beautifully and treating him with respect. There's that interesting dichotomy there. That's how convinced and against St. Paul they were. Okay? So let's now continue with Publius here. Chrysostom points out that even though he didn't witness all of the things that went on, he still had compassion on St. Paul and the crew, in that he fed them, he housed them, 276, whatever the number was. There's a huge entourage that this guy houses. And Chrysostom has this to say. See how all this is done for the sake of Paul, to the end that the prisoners should believe, and the soldiers and the centurion. See, when the judgment is right, and not preoccupied by some passion, how immediately it gets right judging and gives sound verdicts. In other words, this guy's heart is good, right? This is genuine compassion that he's showing for St. Paul and everybody. And, we should be reminded of how we're told that the gospel is written on our hearts. Whether we have been told about Christ or not, in our very innermost being, we know God, and we know love, and we know the right thing to do and the right way to treat each other. And that's being expressed in this guy here. He doesn't know who Paul is. He doesn't know what's going on. He simply houses his entire entourage. And as I don't know if as a reward is the right way to say it, but in return, St. Paul heals him and does a bunch of other healings, right? So now, Publius's compassion opens an opportunity for more miracle healings, right? To show that purity of his heart. Listen to what Chrysostom says here. He says, it is plain that having thus received them, they also received the word of the preaching. For it is not to be supposed that during an entire 3 months they would have had all this kindness shown them, had these persons not believed strongly, and herein exhibited the fruits of their conversion. So that from this we may see a strong proof of the great number there, was of those that believed. So you see this beautiful this beautiful synergy of everything going on, right? You have St. Paul in his humility, the power of God, the miracle of the viper, the pure compassion of Publius, the openness of the barbarians to the understandings that gods could be anywhere. You see all of that in a beautiful way, that perfect storm of belief. And they spend the entire 3 months together. And then we know that everyone now is a member of the church. Everyone is the believer. They escort him to the ship. That's where we're going next. And so they send him off. So there's this beautiful moment of opportunity after opportunity, just building upon for the glory of God and for the success of the gospel. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful image there. Yeah? Questions? Anyone? They're kind of quiet online today too, except for noticing our flies. Okay. Verse 11 through 16. Does anybody want to read? We have a new person here, and she's very shy and timid. And she said she would stay on one condition, that I did not make her read. And I told her I couldn't guarantee it. However, since Pauline and Janelle are willing to read, she's going to be able to escape tonight's Bible study without reading, I think. We'll see what happens toward the end. Okay, Janelle, 11 through 16.
After 3 months, we sailed in an Alexandrian ship whose figurehead was the twin brothers, which had wintered at the island. And landing at Syracuse, we stayed 3 days. From there, we circled around and reached Rhegium. And after 1 day, the south wind blew, and the next day we came to Ptolemy, where we found brethren, and were invited to stay with them 7 days. And so we went toward Rome. And from there, when the brethren heard about us, they came to meet us as far as Appii Forum and 3 Inns. When Paul saw them, he thanked God and took courage. Now when we came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard, but Paul was permitted to dwell by himself with the soldier who guarded him.
And now Paul is in Rome. All this time, from the moment that it was prophesied, you've got to give my message to Rome. Now St. Paul makes it to Rome. And that makes me a little sad, because that also means this is going to be the end soon of our Bible study. But we still got 1 whole week to go, so don't panic. Okay, we can panic next week.
This went on for 3 months.
3 months they were there, yeah. Now, that was from, now they leave Malta, and now they again, they're in the ocean. Now they stop at Syracuse, not New York, by the way, the original Syracuse. And then they stop a couple of days here, stop a couple of days there, but they're on their journey now. Okay, so there's not this long-term thing. It's just moving from one place to another. Remember that one of the things Chrysostom said a long time ago, that when St. Paul wanted to get there quickly, he sailed. Remember? And then if he wanted to spend time, then he'd get on land and he'd go from village to village or whatever, spreading the gospel. So this is an indication, okay, now let's get to Rome, let's get to go what we got to get to. So they get in the ship and they go, right? And other than a couple of stops here and there, which really would have been for supplies and things like that, and a quick little respite, it's hip, stop, move, hip. They just keep, like the rest area stops, along the highway. Okay. At this point, which is so exciting, is that the gospel has reached now as far as Sicily, right? And one of the things that, although Chrysostom doesn't mention it here, one of the understandings is, again, this timing of God. When we see in the gospel the fullness of time had come, right? That's one of the expressions you see in the scriptures. One of the things people talk about is that the Roman Empire itself provided for God's timing. Because it was because of the Roman Empire that news and people were able to travel so easily from city to city to city, and that the gospel went along those, on the backs of the travelers, so to speak. So here, Chrysostom is pointing out that the gospel has already reached as far as Sicily. Now, we don't think that's very far, but in those days, that's a great distance for something that, literally is passed on from person to person for it to reach all the way to Sicily, and for them to find a group there, not just one lone believer, but then find a group there, shows that in fact that the gospel has been spreading. Okay, the other thing that Chrysostom points out is this provides comfort and encouragement to St. Paul. And he goes on to explain a little bit about that. Not only does it show St. Paul's human side, that he takes comfort knowing that the gospel is working, in the sense that there are people believing, that the growth is happening, that the church is growing. That in a very human way gives him encouragement. Okay, it's not for nothing. Okay, I'm not going through all this for nothing. The gospel is spreading. But it's also in the sense of that power. You know, there's nothing that's going to stop this message. This message is going to get out, right? And St. Paul is just part of that process. The last thing we want to say here before moving on to our teaching section tonight is that in all of this, now we're talking about months and months and months worth of journey. This is not a 3-hour trip, you know, from Jerusalem to Rome, or however, I don't know how long of a flight that is in today's world, but this is a months-long journey. Not only the journey here, but also this extended trial before. Remember, this was what was it, 2 years in the one jail. I mean, this has been a long process for St. Paul. And Chrysostom points out that after all of this, he's traveling not as a criminal. Everyone over and over and over again has proven his innocence. But he's got guards. And Chrysostom points out that the guards are not to stop him from escaping, but they're to protect him from the Jews. Because the Jews are continuing. They have been the ones who have been following him from town to town, city to city, ship to ship, trying to stop him. Right? So Chrysostom points out that he's allowed to visit people. He's allowed to go stay at someone's house. I mean, technically, he's under their guard. But he's not traveling as a criminal in the sense that they're not treating him as a lousy criminal. They're treating him as a respected individual. And so they're giving him certain rights. Okay, and this is what Chrysostom has to say here, and then we're going to move on to our teaching section. It says, they would not else have been to accuse him. Nevertheless, it was not for this that he cared, it was for the teaching that he was concerned. So this wonderful protection, this is constantly giving him that opportunity, whether it's talking to the guard, whether it's talking to the people on the island. He's constantly saying the opportunity to preach the gospel and to teach the people. That's what he's constantly doing there. And that is what gives the strength. So Chrysostom takes that reality of this endurance that St. Paul had to go through. And, you know, he talks about how that made St. Paul that much stronger. So if you're new to our Bible study, what we're going to do now is we're going to shift gears a little bit. The first portion was a traditional chapter and verse Bible study inspired by St. John Chrysostom's homily, but where we actually look at the scripture verses and have a better understanding of what that means. In every homily, St. John Chrysostom takes something from there and he leaps into a beautiful teaching, a beautiful moral, a beautiful ethic. And so we have been following that pattern now through these 2 years of our Bible study. So if you're new, that's what we're about to go do. So our new section, now we're going to switch gears. In our teaching section tonight, I have called Trials Bring Strength. So now's the time in our Bible study where we read directly from the homilies. And so if you have your hardcover homily with you, we're going to be on page 321. If you don't, it's okay. It's printed in the study guide. And as a reminder for everyone at home, if you want to chime in a couple of questions, I'll do my best to work them in to our conversation this evening. So, There are 5 points to make tonight in our teaching section. And our first one is struggle works to our advantage. So if you're in the homily book on page 321 at the second column all the way at the bottom. Pauline, do you see it there? Page 321, all the way at the bottom of the second column. And it begins with the words, "For this is a marvelous thing, that not by the things which seem to be for our security, but by their very opposites, all comes to be for us. And that you may learn this," and he goes on to give some examples. "Pharaoh commanded the infants to be cast into the river." That's Exodus 1:22. "Unless the infants had been cast forth, Moses would not have been saved. He would not have been brought up in the palace. When he was safe, he was not in honor. When he was exposed, then he was in honor." And so Chrysostom gives a couple of other examples of that. But think it's a beautiful place that he starts there. Had Pharaoh not been so angry to try and get rid of the babies, then Moses would not have eventually been raised in the palace, which is what gave him the position of privilege in order to save the people. So this is the direction Chrysostom is going here, that sometimes our struggles and trials in life are for the good, right? Even though at the moment they feel pretty horrific to us, right? I think it's a great place for him to start this thing here tonight. Point number 2, it isn't about living to an old age, but living properly. Chrysostom just has these beautiful little gems in his sermons. I'm on page 322. Pauline, if you're going to follow 322, first column, about 2/3 of the way down. "For say, what do they gain who die more slowly? Nothing. For the having good days does not depend on the living many years or few years, but in using life properly." And I just want to take a moment there, because I was just again recently having a conversation with someone about sickness and health, and I'm constantly reminding people that even when we go to the hospital at someone's sickbed, we're not praying merely for physical health, but we're praying that they be given the time to repent. And that's what Chrysostom is saying here. It isn't about how long you live, right? It's about how you live in the sense of living a holy life, right? No, he's not becoming a moralist here. He's not talking about the only thing is good ethics. He's not talking about that here. He's talking about living the holy life, not just, because non-believers can feed the poor, right? So he's not talking about that kind of moralism, but I think it's a good thing for us to always be reminded of. It isn't the length of our life, it's are we living it properly? Are we living it according to God's will? That's what matters. And if that means that's 20 years, or if that's 100 years, or if that's 63 years, whatever it is, that's the goal of life, to live it properly. Point number 3. So if that's the blessing, now St. Paul always gives us St. John Chrysostom, like St. Paul, always gives us a little bit of punishment. He says, punishment is worse when we hurt ourselves. Now, remember, Chrysostom has always talked about the benefit we receive when we receive the struggle, when somebody does something to us. So he takes it in a direction, and he's warning us now about when we cause the problem, that's when the punishment is greater. And he's talking about Adam now. So we're on page 322, second column right at the top. If Adam was the worse for it, it was he that injured himself. He's talking about, death and being kicked out of the garden and things like that. For it is the wrongs that are done For it is the wrongs that are done to us by others that become the means of great good to us, not so the wrongs which are done by ourselves. As indeed, because the fact is that when hurt by others we grieve, but not so when hurt by ourselves. Therefore it is that God shows that he who suffers unjustly at the hands of another gets renown, but he who injures himself receives hurt. That so we may bear the former courageously, but not the latter. And then I'm going to skip to another section and continue reading here. He is the less punished when he has sinned through the devil's working in him. For the punishments are not the same for all sins. Let us not deceive ourselves. The devil is not the cause of our taking harm, if we be watchful. Rather, what he does is to wake us out of our sleep. What he does is to keep us on the alert. So, what Chrysostom is trying to say here is, the devil has a role to play in our sin. We have a role to play in our sin. And this is why when we cause ourselves the harm, this is why the punishment is the greater. Because we are the ones that are giving the devil that opportunity. The devil doesn't do it to us. Okay? But what Chrysostom has to say here is a really beautiful nuance. It's even worse when we think it up ourselves. It would be better. This is why he's beginning with Adam. It would be better if the devil tricked us than if we just, in our own selfishness, decided to sin. And this whole thing that he's talking about here is remembering the garden. And he says, look, the devil tricked Eve into sin. If Eve, although it wasn't the case, but if she had, without being tricked by the devil, simply decided to disobey God and eat the fruit, there would have been even a greater penalty there. That's what Chrysostom is trying to say here. Right? That because we're tricked by the devil, God is merciful to us. Right? Because the devil, I mean, that's one of his names, the conniving one, the trickster, the deceiver. And so because he's so good at it, when we get tripped up by him, God is merciful to us. But if we come up with the ideas by ourselves, whoa, we better really watch out. Because now we're really headed in the wrong direction. That's what he's trying to point out here when he says that he is less punished when it's because the devil is working in him, if that makes, okay? Now we're going to go back another page. Point number 4, this thing about the devil, we are the ones that give the devil permission to enter into us. Remember, so the devil can't do anything to us without our permission. So there's that cooperation, which is why we're not, it's not the devil doesn't do the sin, but he tricks us. If we wouldn't give him the time of day, he wouldn't be able to trick us. So that's the kind of direction we're going here. For say, why did the devil prevail in Judas's case? When Satan entered him, this is John chapter 13, verse 27, you will say, yes, but bear the cause. It was because he was a thief, and bear what was put in the bag. It was he that himself gave the devil a wide room to enter into him, so that it is not the devil who puts it into us in the beginning. It is we that receive the invite. We receive and invite him. And that's why he goes on to say that it's not the devil, but the devil wakes up the things that are already within us. That's the trickster in him. Right? That's why, one of the reasons, of parenthesis, why we're so skeptical of these things of, hey, I see visions, or hey, I'm something special. we're skeptical of it because that's how the devil tricks us into thinking that we've got something that we deserve or something special within us. And that's how, that's how we lose focus.
Kind of like we open the door for them to come in.
Right. We open the door. The devil cannot open the door by himself. We open the door to him. But there's a question here. And President, I don't know who said it, but okay, the question is, so the quote, devil made me do it is a real defense? No. It is only a mercy, it's a cry for mercy. As Chrysostom points out, the devil wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't already there, right? And that's where the devil, but it's our weakness. And I think ultimately what Chrysostom wants us to see here is that because of our weakness, God is merciful. Okay? Adam and Eve were weak, which allowed the devil to come in and trick them. Right? Ultimately, though, our sins are our own responsibility. Chrysostom is not saying, here's what he's not saying. He's not saying that if the devil tricks us, we are not responsible for it. He's simply saying that if the devil is the one who tricks us, it is less penalty for us. Not that there's no penalty. So the defense presbyterian would be that when they say the devil made me do it, he didn't make us do it. He tricked us to do it, which gives us a slight, you would say, in today's court of law, where the judge eased the sentence. He reduced the sentence. So our sentence is reduced because the devil tricked us. What Chrysostom wants us to see here, I think, is that because of our weakness, we have these realities. And that's where God turns around and says, now look, in these weaknesses, in these struggles, in these trials is how we get stronger to be able to defeat the devil's trickery. That's where that relationship comes into play. All right, so it says here, question, if we open the door, how is it that we sin on our own? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. It says if we open the door, if the devil comes in, and the reality is this, this is one of the reasons why that tarot cards are dangerous and fortune telling is dangerous. Why? What's that thing called in the newspaper? The horoscopes are dangerous. Anytime we're dealing with the darkness, even just to pretend, we're playing around, we're playing with fire, and so that's the initial entry of the devil. The question here, how is it that we sin on our own? Because the devil cannot take our hand and make us do something. All the devil can do is work in our mind. All the devil can do is tempt us. All the devil can do is make us think that we deserve something. And then we take our hand and we go steal the apple. Okay? I think that's where, Denise, I hope that helps. I think that's maybe where that might be headed. Denise, by the way, received last week's cross. So Denise, you do not get another cross. I'm sorry. Okay.
For our new person, do not give these items if you're new person. You're punished.
She already has. Don't get jealous now, Janelle. Don't get jealous. Okay. All right. Last point. Point number 5. Cares and anxieties are an exercise for the soul. So now we're heading along. So if there's this weakness and there's this mercy, he's gonna bring it all back together and say, okay, this is how we get stronger. So I'm on page 323 in the homily, first column, about 2/3 of the way down. He says here, but as it is, cares and anxieties are an exercise and discipline of philosophy, a method for the best of training. For say, let a man be brought up in a palace, having no pain, nor care, nor anxiety, and having neither cause for anger nor failure, but whatever he sets his mind upon, that let him do. In that let him succeed, and have all men obeying him. See whether such a man would not become more irrational than any wild beast. Ooh. He continues, but as it is, our reverses and our afflictions are as it were a whetstone to sharpen us. For this reason the poor are the most part wiser than the rich, as being driven about and tossed by many waves. Thus, a body also, being idle and without motion, is sickly and unsightly. But that which is exercised and suffers labor and hardships is more comely and healthy. And this we should find to hold also in the case of the soul. Iron also, lying unused, is spoiled, but if worked, it shines brightly. And in like manner, a soul which is kept in motion. Look at that.
And that's how we talk about.
Use your microphone.
And that's how we talk about that we can't be Christian without being around other people.
Right. Yeah. And let me expand on that, because the reason we can't be human, let alone Christian, we can't be human without being around other people. Because we need the working of we need to be able to, love has to be lived. Love is not a self-consuming thing, right? So you can't love without somebody else to love. And so what he's saying here is that it's that struggle. I love that he said, don't tell the poor people, don't tell the rich people in America. The poor are for the most part wiser than the rich, right? And that's because they have to know how to fend for themselves. The rich, everything is given to them. I don't think they do it anymore, because I don't think anybody does. But the old question when you ask the politician, how much is a gallon of milk? And the rich person never knows how much a gallon of milk is, because he just puts it in his cart and pays the bill. But the poor have to know exactly, can they afford a whole gallon, or does it have to be a half gallon this week? Right? So that's what Chrysostom is saying. So that honing of the blade is what makes our soul stronger, right? And so where he's gone with this is, again, he's leapt over, his inspiration is this long endurance and trial that St. Paul went through, made him that much stronger, made it that much stronger for him to present the gospel, right? And so he's saying, look, if we follow that, we too are going to be the ones who are strengthened, as opposed to getting lazy, as opposed to just kind of our souls is wasting away to nothing. So that's what he's trying to make that comparison there. All right. So if struggles are going to make us stronger, that brings us to our life application challenge. If you're new to our Bible study, we end each Bible study with what I call a life application challenge. I have said many, many times, it doesn't do us any good to even memorize the scriptures if it does not somehow affect the way we live. So here at our Bible study, we finish every week with a life application challenge. Of course, inspired by St. John Chrysostom's homilies. Tonight's life application challenge is be thankful for your struggles. I mean, obviously, if they're going to make us stronger, if they're going to polish our sword, then clearly it's something to be thankful for. Here's what he says. And this is basically the ending section of the sermon. So if you're in the homily book, page 323, second column, halfway down. It is a good thing, even pain in moderation, a good thing, care, a good thing, want, for they make us strong. Good also are their opposites. But each of these, when in excess, destroys us. And the one relaxes, but the other, by overmuch tension, breaks us. Seest thou not that Christ also trains his own disciples? If they needed these things, much more do we. But if we need them, let us not grieve, but even rejoice in our afflictions. For these are remedies, answering to our wounds, some of them bitter, others mild. But either of them by itself would be useless. Let us therefore return thanks to God for all these things, for He does not suffer them to happen at random, but for the benefit of our souls. Therefore, showing forth our gratitude, let us return Him thanks. Let us glorify Him. Let us bear up courageously, considering that it is but for a time, and stretching forward our minds to the things future, that we may both lightly bear the things present and be counted worthy to gain the good things to come. I mean, wow. This is why they call him the golden mouth. The golden mouth, Chrysostom. This is why. I mean, not just the poetry, but the wisdom. It is totally against our human fallenness to be thankful for our struggles. We so totally want the easy way out. But it's not what makes us stronger. And what continues to amaze me as I go through life is that we know that to be true. We follow those rules when it comes to education. We follow those rules when it comes to the gym. We follow those rules when it comes to anything other than our soul. We know that hard work pays off. And we're not talking about the paycheck. We know that hard work makes us stronger. And yet we don't want our souls to have to work. And that's what I'm continually amazed at how many people, knowing that in every other thing of life that is true, they don't want to do it in their own spiritual life. They don't want to do it in their spiritual life. You know, to use using the term exercise, they know that when they go to the gym, if they sit there in the gym and just look at everything and say, "Oh, isn't it really pretty?" they know they're not going to get healthy. And yet, we like to come to church, look around and say, "Isn't everything really pretty?" And we expect that our souls are somehow going to grow. And it's just as impossible. Even nature. Forget about our own life. Look at nature. If trees and bushes are left unpruned, they don't grow stronger. They grow all sorts of wild different ways or whatever. But nature prunes them and they gain their strength in your garden. You prune your shrub after it blooms and you get more blooms the next year, not less. The grapevines or whatever the case might be, it's the struggle that gives the strength. And yet always we find ourselves wanting to avoid the spiritual struggle. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense to me. But it's part of our fallen reality. All right. I want to, before we leave, I want to acknowledge the people who came on tonight. We had a good group, they had a good conversation. So since we have a couple of minutes, we have Joyce from Louisiana, Matt, who should be in Florence tonight, is in Raleigh. We have Angeliki in Canada. We have Denise in Virginia. Presbitera is here. We have Scott. Scott, I don't know where you're from. We have somebody else from Ashland, Massachusetts. We have Panayotis is here from London. We have JC. JC, I don't know where you're from. We had a great group tonight. I feel, what was that old TV show when I see Billy and Johnny and Susie, and I'm looking through a little, what was that TV show? Romper Room. That old, you were too young to remember Romper Room, it's okay. But we had a great turnout tonight, so I want to thank everyone for participating. Next week, again, I know that it's been a long journey, but next week is our last Bible study in this series. We just finished week 55. Next week will be session 56. Oh, Scott is in Omaha, Nebraska, and Brigade JC is in Walterboro. Oh, I know you. I know who you are. It's good to have you here tonight. Okay. There's a question. How do we know when the struggle is from God or from sin? Oh, Presbytera asks a good question. That's a great way to finish. How do we know when people are already saying goodbye, but don't leave yet? This is like one of those bonus questions. Okay. How do we know when the struggle is from God or from sin? What she means by that question is, sometimes we suffer because we made a mistake. And sometimes we suffer because we're being pruned. That's her question. And the reality is, you're never really sure. So you're always thankful for it. And the reason I want to say it like that is because if we always assume that the struggle is a good thing for us, then we will embrace it to grow stronger and learn from it. Okay? On the other hand, if we always think the struggle shouldn't be, now the struggle is because of our own sin, and therefore we can avoid the struggle, then we fall into some kind of a fantasy land, right? We can't avoid it. So it's a weird thing. All struggle makes us stronger. Some struggle is because we sin, and therefore, it's kind of like, how do I want to put it? We talked about this months and months, maybe even last year sometime, but how I'm losing the word I'm going to look for it in terms of when the struggle is because of our own sin. It's a punishment. And I suppose I'll leave it with this, Presidenta. It's there's not always a reason for something. Sometimes things just happen, right? And so sometimes the struggle is always a blessing, but sometimes we bring it upon ourselves. Sometimes others bring it upon us. And at least following what Chrysostom had to say tonight, when we bring it upon ourselves, that's when we have more danger. So I suppose maybe that's a good place to leave it.
But we have to...
You have to use your microphone.
We have to decide which is a struggle and which isn't a struggle.
Well, I think we pretty much know when something is difficult, it's a struggle. I think the question that Presidenta was leading to is the struggle a punishment or is the struggle a pruning? And my advice is, if we always look at it as a pruning, then we're always going to grow from it. We've talked about this before. If you look at Adam and Eve, were they punished when they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, or were they pruned and saved? Right? It was the same act, but depending, if you're looking at them as merely as punishment, then no good can come from it. If you look at it as a pruning, they were saved, that, I'm removing you, now you're going to have this struggle so you can become stronger, then it's a good thing. I think that's the difficult part to look there. All right, so we're out of time. So that brings us to the end of session 55. So for those of you who are just joining us, you have a lot of catching up to do before next week's final Bible study. So next week is the series finale. Next week we will have our final Bible study in this amazing project, one that I never really expected that would be such a beautiful opportunity for us. But I want to thank everyone who's participating tonight. Those of you who were participating in the on the online chat room, great conversation going on over here. Thank you to Presbytero Vase, my wife, for moderating the chat room. Thank you to the ladies in the room tonight. You got off without reading this week. Next week, I'm not so sure. But I'll tell you what. To make sure you come, I'll promise you you won't have to read if I don't need you to read. How's that sound? I want to thank the Orthodox Christian Network for presenting our Bible study on their servers tonight. I want to thank the church here in Florence for allowing us to broadcast from this wonderful facility. I want to thank God for bringing us together. Until next week, God bless you. Christ is risen, and don't forget to live a new life in Christ.
Thou wast transfigured on the mount, O Christ our God, revealing thy glory to thy disciples as far as they could bear it. Let thine everlasting light shine upon us sinners, through the prayers of the Theotokos, O giver of light, glory to thee.
Be Transfigured is a production of the Transfiguration of Our Savior Greek Orthodox Church in Florence, South Carolina, and presented by the Orthodox Christian Network. Contributions in support of this ministry may be sent to Be Transfigured, 2990 South Cashua Drive, Florence, South Carolina 29501, or online at our website at www.liveanewlifeinchrist.org.